And a well executed SOX program not only strengthens your internal controls, but it also enables your business to scale with confidence. So, whether you're in the midst of a transformation or planning for one, proactively assessing your SOX risk and seeking expert guidance is key to ensuring that smooth and successful process.
This episode is brought to you by Green Skies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction for an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Green Skies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Green Skies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit.
Everybody, this episode is brought to you by Clearsulting. Clearsulting is a digital finance consulting firm, and they're known for implementing, optimizing, and managing best-in-class financial software solutions, but that's not all they do. They are true, legitimate advisors, and they believe in figuring out exactly what the organizations need to thrive and to grow. They build transformative relationships among the organizations they serve, and they free up time to focus on what matters. What matters? Uncovering new insights that drive businesses forward. Ultimately, that's what matters, and that's what they do. In risk advisory, they believe in evolving risk management solutions. They're a trusted partner across the three lines of defense, supporting internal audit, co-source and outsource, controls integration, and controls execution support as well. They're also going to be at GAM next week, so be sure to look for the Clearsulting booth. It's number 216. So you walk in to the exhibit hall, go about to the middle of the room, take a hard left. They'll be right there. All right, we'll see you out there. So it's similar to other guests. I'm sure you use AI, ChatGPT, Copilot, likely they're Clearsulting, whatever the case may be, or even in your personal life. But is there any use cases that you could share on how you've used it recently, either personally or professionally?
Oh, I am putting ChatGPT to work. Um, I, we all can use it to summarize reports, draft emails, and I'm talking real life hacks though, like things that actually make my day better. And at the end of the day, decision fatigue is real. And I make dinner with my husband every night, and so I'll just throw in ChatGPT. Give me an easy 30-minute recipe with chicken thighs, a red onion, and staple pantry items. And it'll give you a couple of examples, and it just makes my life so much easier because I'll look and see, okay, what do we have? We have an orange and a lime and lemons, whatever fresh produce we have, and it provides pretty good options for me. And it's just one less thing to think about and makes my day a lot easier.
It is about dinner. I mean, even as a child, I remember my mom being like, "If you'll just tell me what you guys want, I will make it for you." And we're just like, "Oh, I don't know, you figure it out." And even now, back and forth between my wife, it's the classic, like, "Where do you want to go to dinner?" "I don't care." "Where do you want to go?" "I don't care." And so it's just like, "All right, let's go get Mexican." And she'll be like, "No, I want sushi." And it's like, "Fine, let's go get sushi. Why don't you just say sushi to begin with?" But I don't think that ever ends. So, yeah, thankful to have ChatGPT for that. I'm curious now that you say that, and I like the stocked pantry, like, your typical pantry, because I've thought about that use case as well, but I was like, I don't wanna have to sit there and go like salt, pepper, we have this, this,
No.
this, and so that's a good way to summarize those. But then I also wonder if you could just like take a picture and go, "Here's what I have, tell me what to make."
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
I think we're gonna try
And
that.
it ends up giving you options that kinda get you out of your boring rotational chicken thighs that I make in the oven every day. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I know like largely what we're talking about is like transformation within an organization and SOX impact and how to more or less account for that if I kind of summarize this. But even before we jump into that, I know we get messages through LinkedIn and emails and other mediums where people go like, "Hey, I love what you're talking about. I just started in this. Can you help with, talk about this topic, and this topic?" So I try to keep those folks in mind. So just real quick for those that are fairly new to internal audit, or even external audit. When we say transformational changes within an organization, um, big changes within an organization, especially relative to the impact it could have on SOX. Can you just like bullet point like this is the type of transformational change I'm talking about? This one, this one, this one. Just we don't have to go into like a ton of examples, but just a few to get some context.
Yeah, of course. So transformations can come in all shapes and sizes. And in my role, I've had the opportunity to see firsthand how those transformations, whether it's a full scale ERP or technology implementation or a merger, an acquisition, you could do process reengineering or shared service transitions. Those are the typical transformations I see, but they come in all shapes and sizes, and definitely something we want to acknowledge and call out, that will probably get into some details that barely scratch the surface of all the different types of transformations we can have. So that is a good way to start this discussion.
So now that we have that kind of background and context, how should like organizations think about structuring their approach to SOX during these large scale changes, during these transformational changes? Whether that's I was just talking to someone, an internal audit leader, and they're kind of like the PMs over SOX, and then they outsource the rest of it to actually kind of do the field work, things like that. Obviously, there's teams who are fully dedicated to it. So there's the internal, like 100% internally. There's some outsource, there's some hybrid. So almost like regardless of model chosen, how would we go about that?
Yeah, so there are different approaches to handling internal controls. I've seen it handled internally. They've identified someone from their internal audit department to run point for internal controls impacts. I've seen it completely outsourced where we have been brought in as the controls integrator. We work directly with internal audit, the business process owners, IT. And then we've seen hybrid approach where it's a, a team effort or a co-source where we're working together, and they know their business better. We come in with the expertise of knowing this new solution or this new technology and the SOX risk implications around that. So we've seen it in all three ways. Probably the most successful way we've seen it is the hybrid approach, because we get everyone in the same room and able to bounce off ideas.
Hey, everybody, we'll get back to the guests, but real quick, just wanted to let you know block your calendars for March 5th, 2025. If you attended the Audit Analytics and AI conference back in the fall, we're going to do a mini Audit Analytics and AI conference on March 5th. So it's going to be from 9 to 4. So we're going to go 9 to 12. Then we'll do an hour break, and then 1 to 4. These are Central Time, so Chicago time zone. All right, so go ahead, block your calendars off, and we'll make the announcement when registration opens. All right, back to the show. So within like these big transformational projects, and even then, not even necessarily big transformational projects, but especially within those, it can be difficult. Like like roles and responsibilities relative to SOX. There's IT, there's business process, there's management. If you go hybrid, there's Clearsulting folks potentially in there. There's internal audit folks in there. So how do we define those?
So, I would say transformations require multiple stakeholders working together with a clear understanding of those roles and responsibilities, as well as the dependencies between each. So, ensuring SOX compliance within the complex landscape means defining ownership across, I'll say, four key functions. The first one being the business, and the business has an objective. They set their vision, provide business requirements, ensure alignment with the program goals and other initiatives and corporate priorities. And they may be developing and publishing goals and KPIs for the program, and really being a change agent for the new technology. So that's the business. And then I'll see the system and business integrator. I'm putting that as number two. So that's the team that's building the environment based on the current and future needs of an aligned organization. So you may have a system integrator with the technical, like doing the technical implementation of the system. That's coding, customizations, data cleansing, migration, along with testing and technical issue resolution and security role development. But also, you have your business integrator dealing with program discovery, business alignment for process standardization and optimization, ERP business process alignment, and data governance and business readiness. And then the third one, which is us usually, the controls integrator. And so the controls integrator is a key role that leverages the transformation to optimize organizations' response to risk. So, what would that look like? That would look like documenting and validating key business process and IT controls in a future state risk and controls matrix, ensuring interfaces and key reports are properly defined and tested. Sometimes that part's missing. And then embedding those SOX controls seamlessly throughout the activities in the project plan, such as the design documentation and testing of controls to ensure compliance readiness. And the controls integrators also defining sensitive access and segregation of duty requirements. And what's also important for the controls integrator role is partnering with audit and compliance teams to ensure that controls are aligned and tested before go live. Which brings us to our fourth role, which is external audit. So, external audit's objective is evaluate the effectiveness of the internal controls and assess whether those SOX controls are properly defined, implemented, and maintained to prevent financial reporting errors and fraud. And they may provide recommendations to strengthen control design, and they may even review control readiness prior to go live. We like to work very closely with external audit. Now, these are just examples of what roles and responsibilities we would see in a transformation project, but the key takeaway is during transformations, organizations must assign those clear ownership across business, system integrators, control integrators, and external audit. And aligning those roles ensures controls are built into the transformation from the start, preventing compliance gaps and enabling seamless transition to a well documented, controlled environment.
So let's say that someone doesn't consider like those roles and responsibilities, the roles don't align, and it's just like a bit of a mess. We can say maybe for lack of better words. But so like what happens when companies don't consider SOX early in a transformation project?
Yeah, so a few challenges that we see, legacy controls may not align with the new system or the new process, and that creates compliance gaps. One big one is forced functionality changes. Sometimes controls that worked perfectly in the old system don't translate one to one in the new environment. And a great example is SAP's shift from master data records for customer and vendors to a single business partner model in their S4. And that change alone impacts controls around vendor approvals, segregation of duties, financial reporting. And if organizations aren't proactively identifying these shifts, they could have major gaps post go live.
Yeah, you can't just
And
say, "Hey, this is what we used to do with this whatever GL or whatever it is," and so copy and paste the controls. We're good to go for the next ones. Let's keep going, right? Like if that was the change, was the like a GL change or something like that, right?
exactly. And business users may not be fully equipped to address those SOX requirements, leading to last minute workarounds or control breakdowns. And another challenge that we see, especially with mid year go lives, is control effective dates. And audit teams need to know, when controls take effect, and clear communication and documentation are key so that auditors don't end up testing controls that are either no longer relevant or they may be missing ones that should be in place.
Oh, that was the worst. The mid-year changes and you go like, "Well, we
Oh,
gotta
yeah.
test it the old way, and then now we gotta test it the new way," and it's like, "Can you guys just wait until the end of the year to do this? That way we don't have to do as much work on the external audit side." So yeah, I think that's a great especially to give them the heads up and let the, controlled testers especially know like, "Hey, this thing is coming down, you need to be aware of it."
Yeah. So at Clearsulting, we do a lot of tech implementations. One thing that we've seen is that auditors will come back after the wrap up and go live is done and ask all these questions about their controls. And the implementation team has some context of controls, but not all of the questions, all of the answers for audit. So what we're learning is we need to get ahead of it, and we need the risk advisory practice to be involved. Either we need to be involved in the contracting piece and have an assumption in the SOW that says we are not going to be supporting controls, or controls will be handled by the internal control or an internal audit group. But being able to acknowledge that that is a risk to the program and who will own that and who will be responsible for that.
All right, so you did mention that one SOW consideration, which I think is fantastic. So, I'm hoping we can get some more of those. So, like, if a company's bringing in third parties, for example, to support these transformation projects, what should they include in their SOWs? Um, maybe to make sure that SOX isn't overlooked.
Yeah, so many system integrators focus on the functionality over compliance. So it is critical to include those SOX requirements in SOWs. And they should specify, roles, responsibilities, like we talked about, and expectations for control design. Who is designing the control? And that is, and identifying those and documenting those and having that clearly defined, because the integrator may not realize that that's on their plate and that's on them to design. And if it's not, they need to bring in a controls integrator or identify someone on their team to clearly know that you are responsible for documenting the design of this control, making sure that there are no workflows that introduce SOX risks, or that all the workflows mitigate the SOX risks, whatever it might be, and that expectations for that is set in the contract.
So a lot of times organizations, they'll treat compliance as like this completely separate work stream. So like why is it critical to align SOX considerations with the broader, business priorities and the potential interdependencies there?
Yeah, this is such an important topic because too often organizations treat SOX compliance like a checklist item rather than just an integrated part of their business strategy. And the reality is, transformations don't happen in isolation, and they often coincide with other strategic initiatives. Things like process standardization, cybersecurity enhancements, or even financial and operational restructuring. So, if SOX isn't aligned with those efforts, companies can run into conflicting priorities, redundant work, and missed opportunities to automate controls.
Speaking of automation, how can orgs leverage like automation, analytics, continuous controls monitoring, all that stuff that we've been talking about for a long time, to strengthen their SOX compliance during and even after, especially that transformational project?
Getting involved early and being able to take advantage of all of the automation in a technology to point to where controls or SOX risk can be mitigated with an automated control. This can reduce manual workload, and, in a perfect world, all of our controls would be automated, and you would have workflows built into the system, and you would test those workflows in your once a year, whatever it might be, rather than having your manual controls.
And there's, I think a lot of times when we think about automation, analytics, things like that. It's some kind of like external tool where we have to go get this automation tool and we're going to build something and that's going to support the control somehow. But like what you're saying is a lot of these, especially analytics and automation, especially automation, it's already built into whatever the business is using. And a lot of times they just like don't tap into it for whatever reason because it's just like, oh yeah, we got this new thing. Let's just figure out how to do it this way, and then kind of the automation and even the analytics that there's some kind of built-in dashboarding, which is pretty common in a lot of tools now. Even if that's built in, it's like, yeah, we know how to do our job. We're gonna do our job. Maybe we're not gonna go beyond that, and so we're not gonna figure out how to use the dashboard, or we're not gonna look to automate something within that. Is that what you're saying? Like, hey, so it's typically seen as let's use an external tool, but what you're saying is, and I love this, is like, hey, business, take a deeper dive almost into the tool that you have because that functionality probably already exists, right?
Yeah, many organizations miss opportunities to embed those automated controls because SOX wasn't part of the initial design, and there's lost opportunity for efficiency there.
All right, so I appreciate that you mentioned the interdependencies and the business priorities relative to SOX alignment. Can you give some examples of what you've seen, like some real world stuff that you've seen out there?
Yeah, so imagine a company implementing a new ERP while also rolling out cybersecurity upgrades. If IT and SOX teams aren't working together, you might have access control conflicts. And SOX requires certain restrictions for financial reporting, but cybersecurity might have different set of role-based access priorities. And if those aren't aligned, you could end up with either too many manual controls or access gaps that auditors flag later. And another example is process standardization. So let's say a company's restructuring its finance operations to drive efficiency. If SOX isn't factored in, they might simplify workflows, like I mentioned earlier, in a way that inadvertently removes key controls, creating a compliance risk that's only caught after go live. And so to avoid those risks, I would say the key is embedding the SOX team and your controls integrator early and treating it as part of the transformation, not an afterthought. Identifying those interdependencies up front and map out how compliance ties into your strategic initiatives like system upgrades, restructuring, or automation, and really prioritize day one compliance. So, if your controls aren't designed into the new process or system from the beginning, you'll be scrambling to retrofit compliance at often a much higher cost. And if you wait too long, you risk control gaps, audit findings, or even material weaknesses. And by then, fixing the issues means layering on extra manual controls and increasing audit cost and redoing work that could have been designed correctly from the start.
I think it's mostly my fault for asking questions almost in this negative tone of like everything that can go wrong. And I know that's a lot of times how audit is perceived, is like, oh, they're just the bad guys. They're here to get on to us and tell us what we did wrong. And so, like, let's take it to a more positive note. Like, where have you seen in your client work where a company successfully embedded SOX throughout a transformational project? And like, how did that work? Why did it work well for them? What are some maybe some key factors to their success there?
Yeah, so I would say our approach is aligning control responsibilities across internal teams and external partners and clearly defining those roles and responsibilities and engaging internal audit, early in the process. And they should have a seat at the table from the very beginning, not just post implementation reviews. Their involvement can really help identify risk proactively and reduce costly remediations later. And also structuring governance and oversight. So, having that strong governance framework that defines accountability, escalation procedures, ongoing monitoring, and establishing a transformation steering committee that includes compliance stakeholders and helps keep SOX risk top of mind. Those are really good best practices that we typically see. And you're able to avoid the common pitfall of assuming external consultants will handle SOX compliance unless explicitly stated in agreements, like we've said.
Okay. What about with the way AI is changing? Automation is still here. Obviously, it's not going anywhere. AI is definitely not going anywhere. Um, so relative to SOX and the increased just regulatory scrutiny that's still coming down, that's not going to decrease either. Um, what are your thoughts there? And then what could organizations do now to help prepare for those coming changes?
So technology is a game changer in how we work. And I would say continuously refining our processes using automation and data analytics, which help us reduce manual effort and focus on high value activities. We can embrace that low code, no code. I know you have a lot of those on your podcast, which are so interesting. And I really want to get into those. Maybe we'll talk more about that offline, but really AI driven insights to make our work more efficient. For internal audit specifically, though, expanding those automated control testing can really alleviate burden on control performers and free up resources for more strategic work.
Like we've hit on a ton. Obviously, this is specific to SOX and transformation specifically. And I think it's a really good time to talk about that because of, again, with AI and the way it's coming down, things are changing. Things are going to change even more so. But if you had to kind of summarize right now the SOX world and then give a prediction on where you think it's going to be in the next 2 years, even, or wherever kind of your brain goes when you think about this is the next kind of iteration of SOX, maybe, like what is that to you?
A lot more automation, a lot more automated controls, a lot less manual review. Um, I'm also seeing it's not necessarily socks, but it's a new wave of socks standardized in those impacts with the SOW. I mean, think about when we have Oracle upgrades and SAP upgrades. You're going to have SOX implications that need to be considered. Now, they may be standardized, maybe it's the same impacts that we can lift and shift across our clients and say this, make sure you have at least these in your future state control when you roll out this new upgrade. um, we can try and standardize as much as we can across, especially for those automated controls that we know the system has.
You're talking about the Oracle upgrades. I think I've shared this story before on the podcast, but when I was in external audit, there was this group we were working with and the database administrator. I think it was on Oracle. I can't remember exactly, but an Oracle database rather. Um, and so I had to do this big reconciliation. I took the report. This was before the IPE piece. You had to, like, management had to have their controls. It was basically at that point they relied on us to test it and be like, yeah, it's good to go, or no, you're missing something. So this is a few years ago. And so I had this report that was this custom report that the IT had built. And I basically got all the source data from each one of the tables. There's like 5 tables, and then just rebuilt the report from scratch. And of course, it was in December, like busy season, struggling the worst. It was the worst. Um, and there was, I think it was like 250 grand in like inventory that wasn't being accounted for or something. I started to freak out because I was still fairly junior. I didn't really know what materiality was because I was on the IT side of things. And so like I was, like did not want to have to go tell the assurance team, kind of the business process CPA side about this because I was just like, oh, they're gonna be so mad. But I told them, and then they explained materiality to me, and I was like, "Oh, sweet, this isn't as big a deal as I thought it was." But either way, the reason that happened is there was a change, just like a pretty standard patch for this database. They didn't apply it, or rather, they applied it, but they didn't test it afterwards because it's like, oh, it's a patch. We'll just throw it in there and we'll be fine. And so, because of that, if I'm recalling correctly, a table name change or a field change or something to that effect, and basically, it wasn't picking up these other inventory items that I could not find. All right, so with all the change that's going on, especially AI, it seems like everything is changing. For now, SOX doesn't seem like it's going anywhere for sure. It seems like there's only getting more and more added to it. So I appreciate kind of the update on that, especially I think the roles and responsibilities piece was fantastic. The SOW considerations, I think a lot of people are going to take that and go, oh, yeah, we need to think about that a little bit more and account for that kind of stuff. So that was great. Anything else that you want to leave the audience with, though?
Yeah, I would just say as we wrap up that I hope it's clear that SOX compliance should never be an afterthought in a transformation project. And to truly manage risk effectively, it must be embedded from the start. And that means fostering cross functional collaboration and strong governance. So when SOX compliance is approached strategically, it can be more than just a requirement. It can drive operational improvements. It can create long term efficiencies across your organization, and a well executed SOX program not only strengthens your internal controls, but it also enables your business to scale with confidence. So, whether you're in the midst of a transformation or planning for one, proactively assessing your SOX risk and seeking expert guidance is key to ensuring that smooth and successful process. So, for auditors and risk professionals, I know we barely scratched the surface with this topic, and internal audit and SOX needs are unique for each organization and transformation project. So, we'd love to continue the conversation and discuss SOX in the age of transformation and projects in more detail. Clearsulting, my team, will be at the IIA GAM conference the week of March 10th. So if you're around, please feel free to stop by booth 216 and we can chat more.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.